Donald Trump does it again. I got to tell you, there's just this amazing dynamic going on that Matt Taibbi has a new newsletter. It's a subscription newsletter. It's called Hate Incorporated. If you just plug in Matt Taibbi newsletter, Hate Inc., H-A-T-E, hate, the word hate, you can get into it. And he's got this incredible story, this absolutely incredible story that, suddenly reading this thing, the penny completely dropped for me. It was just extraordinary. When I was a kid, 10, 11 years old, 8, 9, 10 years old, a guy who lived down the street from me, a boy who was my age, his name was Dennis. He was sort of the neighborhood bully, and he and I sometimes we were friends, and sometimes he'd, chase me down the street and beat the crap out of me. And his dad was a pretty rough character. But what we used to do when I was on good terms with Dennis was, we'd all go over to his house and we'd watch wrestling on TV, on his black and white TV. And my parents would not have it on in my house. But I used to watch these wrestling shows, and for a while we all thought it was real, And and this is what Matt Taibbi's piece is about. It's called Controversy Creates Cash, which is the title of a book about how to make money in the wrestling business. And wrestling is actually theater. It's theater done by big muscled, steroid-laden guys, but it's theater. And there are two basic roles that are played in the theater of big-time wrestling. One is the baby face, the good guy. The short contraction for that's used in the wrestling world is face. And the other is the bad guy, who is known as the heel. So you got the heel and the face. And Taibbi, in his newsletter, he talks about how back in 2015, when Donald Trump first rolled out his campaign, and this goes right up through Christmas time of 2015, he talks about how Donald Trump is doing exactly what he was doing. He's watching Donald Trump on TV, and he's saying to Matt Taibbi, this guy is doing what I do for a living. Daniel Richards, his persona, his character that he walked into the ring as was called the progressive liberal. And he'd go into these small arenas. I'm quoting from Matt Taibbi now. He enters small arenas largely across Appalachia wearing a shirt emblazoned with Hillary Clinton faces, screaming things to fans like, "You vote against your economic interests!" And the hardcore country crowd would go nuts. Richard was and is a heel act, right? The villain. And, in Appalachia, being the progressive liberal makes you the villain, right? Richard says a heel's job is to bring the heat. Now, I've talked about this a number of times on this program, and you've heard me go off on these rants about this, that back years ago, Louise and I took just an absolutely extraordinary writing seminar from a guy named Robert McKee. And he wrote a book called Story based on his seminars. In fact, I took his seminar 3 times. Louise took it twice, and our youngest daughter took it once. It's extraordinary. And the main point that McKee made was that your hero can only be as good as your villain. So when you're writing fiction, you have to come up with an extraordinary villain. In fact, you kind of do that first. Or if you don't do that first, when you come up with your hero, you have to figure out what the hero's weaknesses are so you can build a villain who can actually be a threat to the hero. So Superman would be boring without Lex Luthor. Batman would be boring without the Riddler or without a series of supervillains. Same thing in big-time wrestling. And the heel has to taunt the face, right? The babyface sometimes responds to provocations with naive dignity, writes Taibbi, not expecting the surprise kick to the face or the crotch that the whole audience knows is coming, right? And then he talks about how Trump did this in 2015. Jeb Bush is married to a Mexican-born woman by the name of Columba. And early in the race, he says, Jeb Bush likes Mexican illegals because of his wife. And Bush goes, "What? I'm proud of my wife. That's totally inappropriate. That's not reflective of the Republican Party," right? So the face here is going, "What? How did you do that?" Or, "You hit me with a closed fist. That's against the rules. And the referee wasn't looking." Right? This is exactly big-time wrestling. And, what does Trump do? Barbara Bush goes on a TV show with Jeb a couple days later, and Bush comes out again and he says, Jeb needs his mommy, right? He's the heel act. And Bush again goes, "I won the lottery when I was born 63 years ago and looked up and saw my mom. Mom is the strongest woman I know." So Trump says, this was in the debate, so Trump says, "She should be running." And Richards, the big-time wrestling guy, he says, "I know that move." Bush didn't know how to handle the situation. He says the babyface will never throw a punch until the heel does it. But when a babyface doesn't fight back, nobody's going to get behind him. And that's exactly what happened to Jeb Bush. In fact, then Trump went on Morning Joe and said, "I thought he was going to push me harder to apologize." In other words, what a wuss. This is literary drama. Audiences, Taibbi notes, love a good heel. They go wild when king douchebag types like Randy Orton stand flexing their pecs and preening in the middle of the ring. Another Trump specialty, the preening, not the pecs. Trump's incessant bragging about his money is the political equivalent of doing a crotch chop in the ring. Look it up, yeah. But almost no one in Blue America spotted this, least of all the press corps. It's like, Taibbi writes about how in the fall of 2015, as Trump was rising in the polls, he saw reporters walking around reading Mein Kampf for the paranoid style in American politics. They were trying to figure out what Trump was doing. And what they should have read was Controversy Creates Cash. It's by Eric Bischoff, a world championship wrestler. And it's a field guide on how to win in wrestling, right? He says, when you watch wrestling, what you see looks fairly simple. This is from the book. It looks like a staged, choreographed fight between two people who supposedly have an issue, something that they're fighting over. What you really don't see is the skill and art that's required to engage the third person in that ring, and that third person is the audience. Without crowd engagement, you got a meaningless story. This is like my saying, if Superman didn't have Lex Luthor, it would be boring. Superman stops a robbery at a 7-Eleven. So what? Right? So everything becomes about building the crowd energy. Without that, your villains and heroes have no juice, and without villains and heroes, you have no crowd energy. Trump, Taibbi says, is a born heel. The exact words that are used in the headlines to describe him right now, a liar, a cheat, a coward, a traitor, those are the words that they use to describe the bad guys in big-time wrestling. Again, this is, here's an example. This is in a speech in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is in December of 2015, just before Christmas. Trump teed off on the bathroom break that Hillary Clinton took during a debate with Bernie Sanders. And he said, "I know where she went. It's disgusting. I don't want to talk about it. Too disgusting. Don't say it. It's disgusting." Then he went off on this tangent saying Hillary got schlonged in her 2008 run against Obama. Right? The whole press corps scrambles to red alert, right? The heel says something terrible to the face. The headlines, Trump goes vulgar and swipe at Hitler, at Clinton. By morning, many of the other campaigns issued official comments. The Clinton campaign predictably denounced this humiliation, this degrading language against all women. Trump tweets, "Once again, the MSM is dishonest. Schlong is not vulgar. When I say Hillary got schlonged, that meant beaten badly." He says Trump tweet was plainly designed to get straight reporters to repeat his bad words for him, even escalate on his behalf, which they did. The Washington Post runs a front-page story. Donald Trump schlonged a linguistic investigation. Now, this is the same week that Fukushima was melting down, Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act was passed. We learned that search engines can influence elections. Nobody even talked about it. Everybody in the press was talking about schlonged. So then Trump raises the stakes. He says, when Hillary got schlonged by Obama, I meant she got beaten badly. Now, all of a sudden, she's gone from getting schlonged to getting schlonged by Obama. So then David Brock jumps into it. And he says, "You're calling Barack Obama a black rapist?" And a female reporter from Forbes magazine is interviewing a rabbi about what this word means, because apparently it's an old Yiddish word, which means a giant penis. Trump created a free promotion machine, and the news media never seemed, he writes, to know what was going on here. But I would point out, as Taibbi does, that in the news cycle, in this, just on, he's right here, it's just on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox alone, Trump led a boom that saw a 167% rise in ad sales in the 2016 election cycle versus the 2012 election cycle. It exploded. So, and again, his entrance into the Republican National Convention, remember that? He walks down this white-lit corridor through the smoke. Taibbi says, this is identical to the Scott Hall walkout, a famed moment in heel preening, a bad guy who comes onto the stage. His arrival by taxiing jet at the Albuquerque rally, where the jet stands behind him. That's dozens of WWE events, like Lex Luger arriving by helicopter to body slam Samoan giant Yakonza, who was the, the face. And, Taibbi just lays this stuff out. And he's right. And, I've been putting it in the context of like large literature. Taibbi says, no, it's worldwide wrestling. So I'm wondering, have you noticed this? I mean, I literally have not watched big time wrestling since I was 10 or 12 years old, however old I was when Dennis Lynch and I used to watch it together. But it just like, whoa, yeah, of course. Which raises the question, what does the press do with this? How do you report on a guy who's running a well-known business model? In fact, he's got the owner of the Worldwide Wrestling thing in his cabinet. I mean, it's not like Trump doesn't know this stuff. Vince McMahon used to run that thing. I think it's his wife who's in Trump's cabinet. And Trump got into the ring with him and sucker punched him. Trump was supposed to be the good guy, and he came in as the bad guy. He came in as the heel. I mean, this is just like so clear. So how do you think the press should be responding to this?